Hello, guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing part 109 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights. We take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've got quite an interesting assortment. We've got a couple birds, a reptile, and a few mammals. We all know loving those and all that. So we're going to be starting off today with the Painted Stork by Monsoon. We'll just have a little look at these guys here. So let's find the adult. So this is a Painted Stork. These guys are a species of stork, one of the large waders. They are found typically in wetlands across tropical Asia, south of the Himalayas in the Indian subcontinent, and into Southeast Asia, which is quite cool. As you can see here, they're quite a interesting stork with that yellow, heavy yellow beak and that down curve to their beak that resembles a lot like that of an ibis. And the head of the adult, as you can see here as well, is also like quite orange or reddish in color, with these long tentacles being with the tip blink and things like that. Using the tertiary wing feathers, you can see there's a bit of pink there. They've also got quite a distinctive black band on their breastband with these white scaly markings, as you can see there, that really makes it almost look like scales. It's quite interesting. And they extend to the coverts, which are the wing bits here, and it appears like they have white stripes going down their forelimbs, which is quite interesting. We'll have a look at you since you're probably not running around so much. But yeah, really cool. Typically, the rest of the body, as you can see, is whitish, other than obviously the pink and the other colors, things like that. And the primaries and secondaries are black with a greenish gloss to them. And in terms of size, they're a medium size for a stork. They typically get about 93 to 102 centimeters tall, or about 36 to 40 inches, with about 160 centimeter wingspan, or about 59 to 63 inches, and weigh about 2 to 3.5 kilograms, or 4 to 7 pounds, with males and females appearing quite alike, but usually the males of the pair are usually larger than the female, so typically females like the bigger males, of course. So in terms of their distribution and habitat, we mentioned that they like to live around the plains of Asia. They are found south of the Himalayas, and they are bounded by the West Indus River system, and they extend eastward into Southeast Asia. They are absent in very dry desert regions, or dense forests, or higher hill regions. They're mostly found in lower freshwater wetlands. And they prefer fresh water in all seasons, and they can be seen in irrigation channels or crop fields as well, and particularly flooded rice fields during the monsoon season, where they typically like to live. Young birds actually may disperse quite far as well from their nests, and there is a juvenile ringed-in nest in the Kyoto National Park, which is actually found 800 kilometers away. And typically when they breed, they're always in these large trees, usually in areas where necessary trees are secluded, and include wetland reserves, along also community-managed village pools and lakes as well, where they tend to like to breed. And they often can breed in urban areas, which is quite interesting. So we'll have a look at you. So in terms of feeding and ecology, these guys typically group in shallow woodlands, crop fields, and irrigation channels, as I mentioned. The maximum success of finding prey is at about 7 centimeters of depth. And they usually will feed and catch small fish, which they can sense by touch, and slowly sweep them up with a half-open bill, where they move from side to side while their beak is submerged. They walk slowly and also disturb the water with their feet to flush out the fish. But they are generalists. They will also eat on frogs and the occasional snake, and they will forage mainly during the day, but they will also forage late or even under night in exceptional conditions. And after they've fed, they may be still on the shore for short distances, and flock sizes on agricultural land are usually a bit smaller, so less than 5 birds, but they can reach larger flocks of up to about 50 birds. And in such landscapes, flock sizes do not vary much between seasons, but densities can be much higher in winter after chicks from the year before have fledged in their nests, which is kind of interesting. So also, these guys will breed in trees in mixed colonies with other species of wading birds, and typically the breeding season begins in the winter months shortly after the monsoons. In northern India, they'll breed about mid-August to start to begin, and then in the southern India, they'll breed around October and continue to February, and even sometimes up to April. And One detailed study showed that these guys will build nests in early February to March, and that have observed having hatchlings fledglings into mid-May. And there's considerable variation in the onset of the breeding season depending on where they are, because there's a lot of variation. Also, there's a lot of cute little stuff about the babies. Let's find the babies. There's the babies. So, in terms of clutch sizes, they typically will have up to 1 to 5 eggs, with early breeders having larger clutches. And the incubation period is about a month, with the fledging period being about 2 months. And there is occasional predation of chicks by eagles and fish eagles, but that's obviously occasional. During the midday heat, adults actually stand at the nest with wings outstretched to shade their chicks, which is quite cute. And to feed their chicks, the adults regurgitate fish that have caught that are typically smaller than 20 centimeters long. And young chicks, when threatened, will actually disgorge food and feign death by crumpling up on the nest floor. So just to act like, hey, I'm dead, don't bother me. The nest survival is the daily requirements of these guys, especially chicks, is be about 500 or 600 grams. Uh, so that's daily, which is made up by 9 fish fed in 2 sessions. And nest survival, which is measured by daily nest survival, is higher than nest initiate early in the monsoon season, lower with decreasing temperatures, and higher in larger colonies. So if it's cool, there's lots of them, and it's early in the monsoon season, they tend to do quite well. The bare red skin that you see on the adults is developed when they reach breeding maturity and actually involves the loss of actually feathers and the deposition of lipids under the skin. And birds in captivity have actually been known to live quite long lives, for as long as 28 years. And birds raised as chicks have been known to be tame and docile, even respond to your names. Just like most things, when they're used to people, they'll be quite used to it. So in terms of conservation, they are considered near threatened, and they often become the center of tourist attractions where they're breeding because of their large size and color, with some, obviously, as I mentioned, becoming big season things. Well-documented colonies have also been made artificially to help breed populations. There are some concerns over their populations, because there's some are endangered because their nests are kind of pillaged and poached for the bird trade, or often sometimes, but they can be bred in captivity readily for their feathers and things like that. And there's also some small populations which are decimated, so that's why they're considered near threatened. But overall, they're doing okay. There are concerns with the closely related milky stork, which could be hybridizing, particularly in zoos, with hybrids being recorded in the wild as well, so that's a bit of a concern. And also other storks, like the lesser adjacent stork, have been kind of issues. But overall, doing okay. Really, really cool. I think Monsoon's done a really wonderful job with this bird here. Definitely a big fan. So we've got another bird up next. We have got the red-footed Booby, done by Leaf, Jen, and Phonetic, which is quite cool. Let's have a look at these guys. Having a good feed. So the red-footed booby is a large seabird of the booby family. So they get their name, the red-footed booby, because they have red feet. But they have quite interesting plumage colors. It can vary quite a bit, and which is quite cool. So the red-footed booby is actually the smallest member of the booby and gannet family, with about 70 centimeters in length, or about 28 inches, and about a wingspan of 152 centimeters, or about 60 inches, with the average weight of 490 adults on Christmas Island was 837 grams, or about 1.8 pounds. And you can see they have these red legs, where they get the name the red-footed booby. They have this bill and throat that are often coloured pink and blue. And there's quite a few morphs in the species. Though you see them brown here, there's often white, and mostly white as well, and with the white feathers being black. And the brown morph, as you can see, is overall brown. And there's quite a lot of variation with this. And this was the white-headed and white-tailed brown morph. So there's a lot of morphs within these guys, and they will communally breed together. That's why they're morphs. They're not a different species. They'll breed readily, but in most regions, there's usually 1 or 2 morphs that will predominate. So in some areas, there'll be a more white morphs, some areas more brown morphs. It's just kind of how it is, which is quite interesting. So the sexes are quite similar, but juveniles are typically brownish with darker wings and pale with pinkish legs, with white chicks being covered in down, dense white down, like this little guy here, a little cutie. But anyway, we'll carry on. In terms of breeding, they've also been... No, we'll skip a little bit ahead. In terms of where they've been found, these guys have been caught killed by coconut crabs, In September 2016, there was actually one that was found in the East Sussex of the UK. Though their usual habitat is typically around the tropics, so they can be found from the Indian Ocean up into parts of northern Australia and Indonesia, then across the Pacific up to the Galapagos, and pretty much around the tropics. And that's where they like to live. And there's even been one in 2017 recorded in mainland New Zealand, so that's always really cool. In terms of their breeding, these guys will typically breed on most tropical islands, and when not breeding, they spend most of the time out at sea, and therefore are actually really seen from breeding colonies. And they will nest in these large colonies and lay one chalky blue egg on a stick nest, and they will be incubated for about 44 to 46 days. And this nest is usually placed in a tree or a bush, but really they may nest on the ground. And it's typically about 3 months or so before the young will first fly, and 5 months before they will initially take off and actually go out to sea and feed. So about 5 months. And red-footed boobies may actually remain together over several seasons, or they will perform these elegant dance very similar to blue-footed boobies, or they'll give greeting rituals such as harsh walks, and the males will display his blue throat and also make a little dance, things like that. So in terms of their diet, very similar to the blue-footed booby, these guys will dive into the ocean at high speeds to catch prey. They mainly feed on small fish, such as flying fish, and also squid, which will gather in groups near the surface, often in bait balls, things like that. And in terms of conservation, they are a species of least concern. No one's too worried about them. But it was believed that the worldwide population is decreasing, which is another not good thing. Because there's things like warm phases, such as the El Nino of 1982-1983, actually quite negatively affected the red-footed booby population on Christmas Island, as the higher populations or the higher water temperatures reduced food supply. And while there was usually about 6,000 pairs nested on there then, about 30 pairs and around 60 pairs attempted breeding in 1982 to 1983, respectively. So some bad years can really hurt their population, but overall seem to be doing well. Really, really awesome mod. See, we've ordered the brown morphs, but there's also white morphs. There's another variant you can get in Planet Zoo. But yeah, a wonderful mod done by Leaf, Jen, and Phonetic. Next up, we've got one by Incognito and Leaf. We're moving on to a reptile. We've got here the false Gharial, also known as the Gharial, or known by its genus name, Tomistoma. So these are a really interesting crocodile. So these guys, you can see they're like a dark reddish brown with black spots around their bands as well, with the ventrals being like grayish white as well. And in terms of their colors and things like that, you can see that they've got quite an interesting like reddish color to them. And in terms of their snouts, you can see they've got one of the slimest snouts of any living crocodilian, comparable to that of freshwater crocodiles and slender-snouted crocodiles in slenderness. And though their false gharials are not that closely related to gharials, they are related but not that closely. Most of their relatives in between them are extinct now. But these guys have a lot slimmer snout to be able to catch fish prey or slippery prey. So in terms of their size, 3 mature males have been kept in captivity, measured about 3.6 to 3.9 meters, or about 12 to 13 feet long, and weighed about 190 to 210 kilograms, or 420 to 460 pounds, while females weighed about 3.27 and weighed about 93 kilograms. But they can get quite big. Females have been recorded getting up to about 4 meters or about 13 feet, with males getting up to about 5 meters or 16 feet and weigh up to 590 kilograms or 1,300 pounds. And they also have the largest skull out of any extant or living crocodilian, mainly because of its length, but also it's quite a bit girthy than things such as gharials, since gharials have quite a long skull, but it's quite lean. It's kind of in the middle. The longest crocodilian skull has been measured at about 84 centimeters, or about 33 inches in length, with a mandibular length, or the bottom jaw length, of about 104 centimeters, or about 41 inches. And these seem to all belong to animals such as, obviously, Tomistoma, or false Gharial. And they could have been belonged to animals up to 5.5 to 6.1 meters, or 18 to 20 feet long. So it's also quite interesting. In terms of their habitat, these guys are native to Southeast Asia. They're found around Malaysia, Indonesia, Borneo, Sumatra, Vietnam, Thailand, but it's unclear if they're in Java. And apart from rivers, they tend to like living in swamps and lakes, and the species is almost entirely found today in peat swamps, and they seem to like a lot more, but as I mentioned, they're kind of getting more endangered. But prior to the 1950s, Tommy Stoma could have been found in the entire length of the Sumatran length of Sumatra east of the Basin of Mountains, and it seems their populations in Sumatra has decreased by 30 to 40% because of hunting, logging, fires, and agriculture. So in terms of diets, these guys, until recently, we really didn't know too much about their wild diets, but the details have slowly been revealed. So they're often thought to only eat very small vertebrates or fish, but they seem to be a little bit more generous than that, despite their narrow snout. In addition to feeding on smaller aquatic animals and fish, mature adults have been known to prey on larger vertebrates, such as proboscis monkeys, long-tailed macaques, deers, water birds, and other reptiles. There's even been an account of a false gharial attacking a cow in East Kalataman, which is quite interesting. And the false gharial is not actually considered to be an ecological equivalent, may be considered an ecological equivalent of neotropical crocodiles, so occupying the same niche within its ecosystem as Orinoco and American crocodiles in the neotropicals, so places like Mexico and Venezuela, so like South America and Central America, while these guys live in Indonesia. So kind of a similar niche because they have that slender snout, but they also have quite a broad diet. And now we get to talk about the babies. Little babies. Where they are. There they are. These cute little babies. So in terms of reproduction, similar to most crocodilians, these guys are mount nesters, with females laying small clutches of about 15 to 35 eggs, and they tend to actually appear to produce the largest eggs out of any crocodilian, which is quite interesting. So once the eggs are laid, the female will actually abandon her nest. Unlike most other crocodilians, they'll actually receive no parental care from the mother, and they're at risk of being eaten by mongooses, tigers, leopards, and wild dogs. And the young will hatch from about 90 days old, and they are left to fend for themselves, unlike most crocodilians. These guys are pretty bad parents for crocodilians. And sexual maturity for females will be reached at about 2.5 to 3 meters long, which is actually quite large compared to a lot of other crocodilians. So quite interesting. So in terms of threats, these guys are threatened with extinction. They are considered vulnerable, I believe. Yeah, they are considered vulnerable. Mainly because of drainage of their freshwater swampland habitats, which they need. Also, clearance of surrounding rainforests. They're also frequently hunted for their skin, meat, and eggs, often harvested for people to eat. But luckily, they are considered vulnerable, and they are people are aware of like the conservation plights. Current population indicates that false gharials are not in the most extirpated part of areas of the habitat. So the distribution used to be quite conspicuous, but now it's a lot more spotty because of people going in and obviously devastation of habitats, since they're getting more and more isolated from each other. And it puts them at risk of genetic isolation. And also in large part is because of these extensive habitat destruction and disturbance, there's few areas outside legally protected areas that are likely to have viable populations of false gharials. Or Sunda gharials. But luckily, there have been steps taken in Malaysia and Indonesia to protect them. There are reports of some populations rebounding in Indonesia, yet with the slight recovery, there's a lot more fears of local populations of people getting attacked by them, which is very uncommon, but obviously a very valid concern when you have large crocodilians living near you. But yeah, it's kind of just common sense. Don't go near them, try and avoid them, avoid waterways, just take care of yourself around these guys. But yeah, really, really cool. Love the false gharial. Incognito did a really great job with these guys. Definitely a big fan. And Leaf also did a great job coding it. So next up, we have got the banded mongoose done by Narwhal and Genora Pizza. So I've got these cute little guys here, based on the meerkat. So the banded mongoose, these are a type of mongoose that live in Sahel and southern Africa. So they can be found pretty much all over central down to southern Africa. They live in savannas, open forests, and grasslands, and they feed on millipedes and beetles. And they will use various types of dens for shelter, including termite mounds, which is quite interesting. And while most mongoose species live alone, very similar to meerkats, these guys will live in colonies and have complex social structures. So, in terms of their characteristics, you can kind of see here, they're quite a sturdy mongoose. They have a large head with these large eyes and small ears, muscular limbs, and a long tail, along with these kind of bands. And animals in wetted areas tend to be larger and darker color than animals from drier regions. And they're also higher and rounder. This rough fur that they've got can either be grayish brown or black, with these several dark brown bands going along their back there, where they get the name the banded mongoose. And they also have long, strong claws, as you can see as well, that allow them to dig into the soil. And the nose of these guys, you can see, is like orange, red, or grey brown, depends on the population and individual. But in terms of size, they get about 30 to 45 centimeters and weigh between 1.5 to 2.5 kilograms, or 2.25 kilograms, and with the tail being about 15 to 30 centimeters long. So quite cool. In terms of distribution, as I mentioned, they've found quite a large part of Africa. They can be found in East, Southeast, and South Central Africa. There's also populations in West Africa as well, where they live in grasslands, open forests, and savannas, especially near water, but they do not live in deserts. They like bushland though. And they will use various types of dens for shelter, most commonly termite mounds, but they'll also live in rock shelters, thickets, gullies, warrens, under bushes. And they often prefer can't even speak, multi-entranced termite mounds with open thickets, which average 4 meters from the nearest shelter, located in these semi-closed woodlands. And in contrast to the dens of dwarf mongooses, banded mongooses are less dependent on vegetation cover and are more open entrances. They also live in larger groups than dwarf mongooses, and thus there's more entrances, so more members have access to the den and better ventilation as well. The development of agriculture has actually been positive on the number of banded mongooses, and the crops of farmland actually serve as an extra food source for these guys. They're actually doing okay. Typically, the banded mongoose lives in many African protected areas, with the Serengeti have a density of 3 mongooses per square kilometre as well, though most have some high densities, like the Queen Elizabeth National Park has 18 mongooses per square kilometre. So in terms of their behavior, these guys live in mixed sex groups of about 7 to 40 individuals, but they average about 20. Groups will sleep together at night in underground dens and often abandoned termite mounds, and they change dens frequently, about 2 to 3 days. While no refuge is available, they're hard-pressed for protection from predators such as African wild dogs. They will group together in a compact arrangement where they lie with each other with heads facing outwards and upwards. And while there's generally no strict hierarchy on mongoose groups, and aggression is low, so they typically do well. Sometimes they may squabble over food, though. However, typically the one who claims the food first wins. And most aggression and hierarchical displays within their groups tends to be between males and when females are in estrus, with females usually not being aggressive, but they do live in hierarchies based on age. So the oldest females have early estrus periods and larger litters, and when groups get too large, some females may be forced out, and they may form new groups with subordinate males, which is quite interesting. And relations between groups are highly aggressive, and mongooses are sometimes killed and injured during encounters between different groups, with mongooses establishing their territories with scent marking, and also serves as communication within the same group. And societies of the banded mongoose, there's clear separation between mating rivals and territorial rivals, with individuals within groups are rivals for mates, and those from neighboring groups are competition for resources and food, which is quite interesting. So in terms of their diet, these guys will feed a lot on insects, myropods, which includes millipedes and things like that, and small reptiles and birds. And beetles make up most of the diet, but they will eat ants, crickets, termites, grasshoppers, earwigs, things like that. And other prey items will include things such as frogs, lizards, small snakes, ground birds, and their eggs of both birds and reptiles. And on some occasion, they will actually drink water from rain ponds and rain pools and lake shores. And they often will forage in groups, but each member will search for food by themselves. However, they work as a team when dealing with venomous animals such as cobras. This is a baby. Yeah, this is a baby. We'll have a look at you anyway because you're a cutie. We'll move on to that shortly. Mongooses usually forage around the late afternoon, and they will forage in the morning as well and rest in the shade during the day. And mongooses will use their sense of smell to locate and dig out things with their long claws. And they will both in holes and grounds and trees and things like that. And they will frequently frequent the dung of large herbivores because that attracts beetles. And low grunts can be produced every few seconds as communication. And with hunting prey that secrete toxins, they'll actually roll on the ground as well, roll them on the ground to try and get rid of their toxins, and durable prey is often thrown on hard surfaces to break them apart. So also alongside, unlike other social mongoose species, bear and mongoose, all females in a group can breed, unlike things like meerkats where it's only dominant female. They will all enter estrus about 10 days after giving birth and are guarded and mated by 1 to 3 dominant males. The dominant males monitor the females and aggressively defend them from the subordinates. And while these males do most of the mating, the females often try to escape them and mate with other males. And a dominant male will spend 2 to 3 days guarding each female, and the guarding male will snap, lunge, and pounce any of the males that come round. And non-guarding males may follow around a guarding male and his females and may face this aggression, with non-guarding males mate in a more secretive way. So they try to secretly get a female and do their own thing without getting spotted. Typically, gestation for these guys lasts about 60 to 70 days. And in most breeding attempts, all females give birth either on the same day or within a few days from each other. And litters will range from 2 to 6 pups and average about 4 pups. For the first 4 weeks of their lives, the pups will stay in the den and they form an exclusive relationship with a single helper or escort whose genetic relationship to the pups may be unknown. And these helpers are generally either young non-breeding males or breeding females who have contributed to their current litter. So this helps minimize food competition over food and allocation among the pups. And during this time, they're guarded by those helpers while the other group members go on foraging trips. And after about 4 weeks or so, the pups will be able to go foraging themselves. And each pup is carried around by an escort who will help the pup around to find food and also protected from danger. And very interesting about these guys as well is that the few studies have shown that these guys will have regular incest avoidance, but banded mongooses are the exception. So typically, breeding pairs are found to be less related than expected under random mating, with inbreeding actually can be a detriment, but it seems to appear to occur in banded mongooses due to the decline of body mass, which is quite interesting. And another cool little fact about these guys is they have a lot of interspecies relationships with animals such as warthogs. They'll remove ticks and fleas from warthogs and often climb on them and take them out. Not take the warthog out, but they'll take the parasites out of the skin, which is a quite interesting communal relationship they have. And they also consider least concern, quite a common species. Quite high densities sometimes where they live. So yeah, really, really cool little guys. Definitely a good little animal. So yeah, next up, this one was done by Narwhal and Chinora Pizza. Next up, we have got the sea otter. This was done by Narwhal. Really, really interesting animal. I've already covered it before, so I'll be a little bit quicker with this one. So the sea otter, these guys are a marine mammal native to the coasts of northern and eastern North Pacific Ocean, and these are a type of weasel, mustelid, which is the otters as well. Really, really cool. So they are one of the smallest marine mammals, but the heaviest mustelid. Male sea otters typically weigh between 22 to 45 kilograms, or about 49 to 99 pounds, and are about 1.2 to 1.5 meters long, or about 3 foot 11 to 4 foot 11. Those specimens have been recorded getting up to about 119 pounds or 54 kilograms. With females on average being a little bit smaller, they weigh about 14 to 33 kilograms or 31 to 73 pounds. And they measure about 1 meter to 1.4 meters or 3 foot 3 to 4 foot 7 in length. And males actually have quite a large baculum that has been upwards, about 150 millimeters base, which is quite big, 15 centimeters. So unlike other marine mammals, they don't have blubber, and they rely on their extremely thick fur to keep warm, which has 150,000 strands per square centimeter. It is the densest of any animal, and they have these long waterproof guard hairs that protect them, and then they have the underfur that keeps them warm, which is quite interesting. So cold water is pretty much kept completely away from the skin, so heat loss is limited. And the fur is quite thick year-round, but they will have a molting season as the guard heads will repel water, so they'll be able to hang out, things like that. So that basically allows them to better control their temperature in the summer, which is quite interesting. They also have quite a few interesting adaptations for swimming in the marine environment. They have small nostrils and small ears that can close. They have large hind feet that they can use to propel themselves. Um, they can also short tails that are quite muscular, and they also have denser bones that allow them to sink properly, which is quite interesting. And you can see they swim. They will kind of paddle with their back legs like that, similar to most other otters, and they can swim up to about 9 kilometers per hour with their long streamlined body that they can swim around and do things. They also have quite long sensitive whiskers and also front paws that are exposed that allow them to feel around and touch for prey, especially when water is dark or murky. And it shows that sense of smell is also quite important to them, that allows them to go and catch prey, things like that. But they don't have that good a sense of hearing. This is quite interesting. In terms of behavior, these guys are diurnal, so they will often forage early in the morning and start an hour before sunrise, and then have a sleep during the midday, and then forage again until sunset, which is quite interesting. So, in terms of foraging, these guys will also, between time foraging, they will groom and clean their fur. They'll tangle loose fur, help with, especially when they're shedding and things like that. In terms of foraging, they'll often hunt with lots of short dives. Let's have a look at you swimming. Let's see if we can get one diving. Typically, they will do that, and they will often dive to seafloor. They can hold their breath for up to 5 minutes, though these dives typically last no more than 1 to 4 minutes. They're the only marine animal capable of lifting and turning over rocks, which they do to search for prey. They may also pluck snails and other organisms from kelp, and they'll dig deep underwater in underwater mud for clams, for example. And the only marine mammal that catches fish with its forepaws rather than its teeth, which is quite interesting as well. And under each foreleg, there's a loose pouch of skin that extends to the chest. And in this pouch, they will often carry food to the surface. And they can also hold a rock, and they can use that rock to kind of lay on their bellies and break apart things like mussels or crabs or things like that. Or sea urchins as well. They're quite an important predator of sea urchins. And they're actually, this use of the rocks is actually shows that they're one of the few mammals that use tools, and they'll be able to open quite big things with that, which is quite interesting. Definitely really, really cool. And in terms of their social structure, although adults and independent juveniles forage alone, they tend to rest in single-sex groups called rafts, which can be up to about 100 animals, 13 to 100 animals, with male rafts being larger than female rafts. And a male sea otter is more likely to mate if he has a breeding territory or an area that is favoured by females. And in autumn is the peak of their breeding season, with most males typically defending their territory from spring to autumn. During this, the males will patrol their boundaries and exclude other males, so extra fighting is pretty rare. With adult females moving freely between male territories, where they outnumber adult males by 5 to 1. And males do not have territories, tend to congregate into large male-only groups, and they'll swim through female areas when searching for mates. And they're also quite vocal species. They will cry. The cry of a pup is often called comparable to that of a gull. The females will coo when they're content, and males may grunt. Distressed females or frightened adults will actually whistle or hiss. In extreme circumstances, will scream. And although they can be playful and social, they're not considered truly social animals, and they spend most of their time alone, though, where they just hang out and do their own thing, which is quite interesting. So in terms of breeding, let's have a look at these cute little guys. Where's the babies? There is one baby. One cute little baby there. In terms of breeding, these guys are polygamous, with males having multiple female partners that typically inhabit their territory. Typically, births will occur year-round, but they peak in May and June for northern populations and January to March in more southern populations. Gestation will vary from about 4 to 12 months, and the species is actually capable of delayed implantation, which is followed by 4 months of pregnancy. So typically, they will kind of mate, and then they'll get impregnated, but they will delay the incubation of the offspring or implantation of the offspring until times are typically a little bit better for them. Let's see if you can find one actually swimming. There we are. I think you're diving. But anyway, typically these birds will breed. They'll breed every year, but even sometimes they'll breed twice a year. Births usually take place in the water, and they produce a single pup that's about 1.4 to 2.3 kilograms, or 3 to 5 pounds, with twins occurring in about 2% of births. And at birth, the eyes open, they have 10 visible teeth, and the pup has a thick coat of baby fur. And mothers have been known to lick the fluff a newborn after hours and after grooming that retains much of their ear. And they will get their adult fur at about 13 weeks of age. Nursing will last about 6 to 8 months in Californian populations and about 4 to 12 months in Alaska populations, and with the mother beginning to offer bits of prey at about 1 to 2 months. The milk of the sea otter's two abdominal nipples is rich in fat. It is actually more comparable to other marine mammals such as whales and dolphins than other mustelids such as otters and other otters and like minks and things like that. A pup with a guidance from its mother will actually practice swimming and diving for several weeks until it's able to reach the sea floor, and then initially objects that it retrieves are little value, such as brightly coloured starfish and pebbles, so they bring it up, be like, hey mum, look what I got, which is so cute. But typically, juveniles will reach independence in about 6 to 8 months, but the mother may be forced to abandon a pup if she cannot find enough food for it, or another extreme, the pup may actually nurse until it's almost at adult size. And pup mortality is quite high, especially in the individual's first winter, with only about 25% of pups surviving their first year of life. And pups born to experienced mothers have the highest survival rate, which is quite good. So females will perform all these tasks in feeding the offspring, but in occasionally been known to abandon or been observed caring for orphan pups. And much have been written around the level of devotion of sea otter mother to their pups, things like that. But once they obviously leave their mother and become independent, they become sexually mature at about 3 to 4 years old, and for females and males about 5. However, males do not successfully breed until probably about a few years later. With a captive male siring offspring at about 9 years age of 19. And in the wild, they typically live to a maximum of about 23 years, with lifespans ranging from 10 to 15 years for males and about 20 for females, with several captive individuals living up to about 28 years, especially a female at the Seattle Aquarium. And sea otters in the wild often will develop warm teeth, which may account for their shortened lifespans. So in terms of populations and their distribution, these guys have quite a wide distribution. You can see the baby there. These guys can be found in coastal waters up to about 23 meters deep, so typically around 15 to 23 meters, or about 49 to 75 feet, and usually stay about a kilometer or so away from shore. They're typically found in areas with protection from the most severe ocean winds, such as like rocky coastlines, barrier reefs, and thick kelp forests. And although they're most strongly associated with rocky substrates, they can be found in areas where the substrate is typically like mud or silt or sand, with the northern range limited by ice, but sea otters can survive amidst the drift ice but not land fast ice, which is quite interesting. The population globally has been estimated to be at once about 150,000 to 300,000, stretching from the North Pacific, from northern Japan to the central Baja California Peninsula in Mexico. But the fur trade in the 1740s drastically reduced that and brought them down to a population of about 1,000 to 2,000 members in about 13 colonies, with hunting records showing that they used to live in Hakidawa and then up to about Mexico as well. And in about 2/3 of their former range, the species is at varying levels of recovery, with high population densities in some areas and other areas having threatened populations. But they currently have stable populations across Alaska, British Columbia, California, Washington, and the Russian East Coasts. And they're apparently starting to recolonize in Japan, with population estimates made between 2004 and 2007 estimates that there are about 107,000 sea otters now, so it's still growing, hopefully. So yeah, quite interesting. In terms of their diet, these guys need to eat at least 20% of their body weight a day, where they spend diving down foraging. They feed on all sorts of different marine benthic invertebrates, such as snails, mollusks, crustaceans, bivalves, sea urchins, things like that. And in a few northern areas, they will also feed on fish, where they have a carrying capacity of 50% of food found in their stomachs was fish, especially in more northern areas. And they will often really eat starfish or kelp, and if they come out, they're undigested. And also, they are considered a keystone species within these kelp forest ecosystems. They eat a lot of sea urchins, which eat the roots of kelp, And obviously, if there's no otters, then there's more sea urchins, which eat more kelp, which means there's less habitat. So they're quite an important species to protect in kelp forest areas because they eat all the sea urchins. And it's actually believed that the decline of sea otters may have caused the extinction of animals such as the Steller sea cow, which is quite interesting. And in terms of their the fur trade, typically since they have such thick fur, they were hunted, as I mentioned before. Large-scale hunting went until they declined to populations of like 2,000, but now they have steadily recovered. Over the 20th century, they've rebounded to two-thirds of their historic range, which is considered one of the greatest conservation success stories. Another really great one. Though they are considered still endangered, and because of things such as oil pollution, predation by orcas, poaching, and conflicts with fisheries as well. Oil spills has a really bad effect on these guys. There's also the restricted range. With some areas they're doing well, some areas they need help, but obviously things like that. Really, really cool. And they've also been quite important to human culture, and people get them in zoos a lot. So luckily they are still recovering. They are doing well, though. They are endangered, but they're doing well. 107,000. There's lots of threats that they still face, but coming back from only about 1 to 2,000 in over about 100 years or so, they really have done well. Such a really great conservation story. Up there with like the bison and the great whales, things like that. So it shows how much, if you just protect what you have, you can have some really good results. So really, really awesome. And also, Nawala did a really great job remaking this guy. I really love seeing the new look of it. Really, really cool. I love sea otters. Such great animals. But anyway, moving on. So after that big diatribe about sea otters, now we're moving on to the wolves. We got the Tundra wolf here, done by Havoc, 1199, Mega Gaming Rex, and Gaboy. We've got the Tundra wolf remake. So really, really cool. So the Tundra wolf, which is also known as the Turakan wolf, which is the scientific name is Canis lupus albinus, which is the subspecies of grey wolf, which is native to the eastern Eurasian tundra and forest tundra zones from Finland to the Kamchatka Peninsula. So pretty much that little band across the top of Europe and across Asia, a lot of Russia as well. And it was first described in 1792 by Robert Kerr, who had been seen living around Yensi, which actually has a high valued pelt. So these guys are quite a large subspecies. The adults will measure about 118 to 137 centimeters, or 46.5 to 54 inches in body length, and females a little bit smaller, about 112 to 136 centimeters, or about 44 to 53 inches in body length. They often written recounts they seem to be larger than C. lupus lupus, or the dominant subspecies. That is untrue, with heavier members of the latter subspecies have been recorded. Average weights is about 40 to 49 kilograms for males, about 88 to 108 pounds, and about 36 to 41 kilograms, about 81 to 90 pounds for females. The highest recorded weight for it was an old male that weighed about 52 kilograms, or about 115 pounds, which was caught in 1961, I believe, around the Termel Peninsula. And very similar to other wolf subspecies, they have quite long fur. Let's see if we can find one walking around. Quite long and dense fur. It's fluffy and soft, and usually either light grey or white in colour, with the lower fur and the as lead grey can be up to reddish grey. So fits with their tundra habitat. So in terms of their habitat as well, these generally like to rest in river valleys, thickets, or forest clearings. In winter, they feed almost exclusively on female or young wild or domestic reindeer, though they will also eat hares, Arctic foxes, and other small animals. The stomach contents of 74 wolves actually caught around in Russia about the 1950s show that they mostly ate reindeer remains, about 93.1%, though in the summer period, they will feed exclusively on birds and small rodents, as well as newborn reindeer calves. So quite an interesting diet they've got there. But yeah, really, really cool. They are considered near threatened in Finland, but I believe they're doing okay across most of their range. They are a subspecies, so they often don't get afforded the same kind of protections as full species. But as Canis lupus as a whole is doing okay, which is really cool. So yeah, and then have a look at these cute little puppies. Look at this cute little guy. I'm definitely a big fan. So next up, last but certainly not least, we've got another really cool animal. This is done by Leaf and Gaboy. Heading to South America, we have got the bush dog, which I'm so excited to see. Nice to see a good bush dog mod. So the bush dog, these guys are a canid that are found in Central and South America. Quite interesting little guy. In spite of extensive range, they're very rare in most areas except for Suriname, Peru, and Guyana, which is quite interesting. But you can see these guys are quite cute little guys. Their Brazil name is Chicoro Vinegar, which means vinegar dog, or Charicho d'Amato, which means bush dog as well. And in some Spanish-speaking countries, they're called Perro de Agua, which is water dog, Zorro Vinegre, which is vinegar dog, or Perro de Mountain, which is mountain dog. So got quite a few names for a cute little guy here, but really, really cool. So, adult bush dogs typically have soft, long, brownish tan fur that has often a reddish tinge to it, as you can kind of see there, depending on the visual. And they sometimes have a lighter throat patch as well, though, however, younger individuals will have a brown black fur across their bodies. Typically, adults have a head to body length of about 57 to 75 centimeters, or about 22 to 30 inches, with about 12.5 to 15 centimeters, or 5.6 inch tail. They have a shoulder height of about 20 to 30 centimeters, or about 8 to 12 inches, and weigh about 5 to 8 kilograms. And they have these really short legs compared to other dogs. But what's also really funny is that their closest living relative is the maned wolf, which is kind of famous for having really long legs. Even though they're quite distant related, they are the closest living relatives of each other, which I find really really funny. And they have teeth that are really well adapted for eating, being carnivores and eating prey. They are one of the three canids, including the dhole and African wild dog, with trenchant dentition, which has like a simple cusp on the carnassial teeth, which is a one of the important molars on animals such as cats and dogs, which is used for cutting through meat and things. And females will typically have four pairs of teats, and both sexes have scent glands on either side of their anus. And they also do have partially webbed toes that allow them to swim more effectively, which is quite interesting. So, in terms of their habitat, they can be found in Costa Rica and Central America and throughout much of the South America, east of the Andes, and as far south as Paraguay and southern Brazil. And typically inhabit lowland areas of about 1,900 meters, or about 6,200 feet elevation. They can also be found in wet savannas and habitats near rivers, but they may also be found in open pasture and cerrados, things like that. Their historical range seems to extend as far north as south as Costa Rica, where they could still be found in suitable habitat. With new reports have been seeing them bush dogs seeing east central and southeastern Costa Rica with potential populations in mountains. And actually, there's very recent fossil populations or fossils found that could have been found in Trinidad, so seem to be quite wide-ranging species. And in terms of behavior, these guys are carnivores and they hunt during the day. They typically will prey on pacas, agoutis, and acuchis, so mainly large rodents, things like that. And capybaras as well. They will feed on capybaras. All large rodents, and although they can hunt alone, they will usually be found in small packs, and these dogs in these packs will be able to bring down much larger prey, such as peccaries and rayas, with a pack of 6 bush dogs being recorded to hunt down a 250 kilogram or 550 pound tapir, where they trailed the animal and nipped at its legs until it felled, which is quite interesting. And when hunting packer, part of the pack will chase it on land and the other will wait for the water when it often retreats, which is quite interesting. And bush dogs also seem to be the most gregarious South American canid. They use hollow logs and cavities to even like armadillo burrows for shelter. With in terms of pairing, these guys will live in packs. Will consist of like a single mated pair with their relatives, and they usually have a home range of about 3.8 to 10 square kilometers, or about 1.5 to 3.9 square miles. Though only the adult pair will breed within this pack, and the other members are subordinates, and they'll help with rearing and taking care of the pups. Pack mates will keep in contact using whines, and perhaps when visibility is poor in the undergrowth, where they typically will hunt. And when hunting large prey, parents position themselves on either ends of the animal, which makes it easier for the pups to try and disembowel them. I love these cute little puppies. Look at these cute little guys. But in terms of reproduction, bush dogs will mate throughout the year with estrus lasting up to 12 days and occurs each 15 to 44 days. And like other canids, they have a copulatory tie where the animals are kind of locked together when they're mating. And urine marking is quite an important role in their pre-copulation behavior, or even like scent marking, things like that. Typically, gestation will last for about 65 to 83 days and normally results in the birth of a litter of about 3 to 6 pups, although large litters of pups up to 10 have been reported. The young are born blind and helpless, and they initially weigh about 125 to 190 grams, or 4.4 to 6.7 ounces, and they open their eyes after about 14 to 19 days, and they will emerge from their den shortly then after. The young are then weaned for about 4 weeks, and then they reach sexual maturity at about a year of age, and they can live up to 10 years in captivity, so a little bit shorter lived than a lot of other dogs, but still really, really cool. And there's also considered to be 3 subspecies, though I'm not sure how valid they are. The South American bush dog, so the dominant subspecies, which can be found in Peru, we can found in Venezuela, Ecuador, Peru, Brazil, things like that. The Panamanian one that lives in northern Colombia and Venezuela and the Panama, and the southern bush dog, which lives in southern Brazil, Paraguay, and in Argentina, which is quite interesting. So really, really cool animal. I do love these guys. Really nice to see a remake of the bush dog, because the original bush dog was a little bit weird, but good boy works his magic as always and gives us a wonderful animal. And Leaf also did a wonderful job coding it and getting it all sorted. But yeah, really, really awesome. Nice to see a great diversity of animals today. So, I think this is a great place to end the video. So I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified uploading anything. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.